welcome to the History Makers Leadership Podcast. My name is Daniel, and I'm joined today by Norval Tundaji. Listen, before we get started, I just want to say this. If this is a resource that's helpful for you, or maybe it's a podcast or a video that you have watched and engaged with, I just want to ask, would you mind liking, subscribing, giving us some kind of feedback? We want to be able to serve Christian leaders just like you around the world, and we have the privilege of doing that in person in so many different contexts, and it's wonderful to be able to see them and engage and interact with them. And one of the best ways that you can help us to serve you better is by doing that little like, that subscribe, maybe giving a comment or some feedback so that we can understand some of the context in which you're leading and some of the questions that you're facing. But Norval, it's been a while since you and I have had a chance to sit down together. It's good to be back with you, brother.
Well, it's good to be back here in the studio. It's good to have again these conversations
Yeah.
that they edify and help us.
Oh, man.
And hopefully they edify and help the folks that watch us as well.
Absolutely. You know, we were talking through and kind of thinking through what are some of the topics that we'd want to look at or kind of address today, and I. You know, we kind of fell upon this question of what does evangelism look like in a context where maybe people are less welcome to it. Maybe they don't see that they have a need for it. Maybe if it's a post-Christian context or a pre-Christian context where there's some elements to that sharing of the gospel that leads to some hesitancy. I was recently able to speak at an event in Texas and kind of talk to some folks, and you were recently in Japan working with some believers there. And so, as we kind of open this up together, what are some of your initial thoughts? Like, well, how would you counsel a brother or sister who's leading in that kind of a context?
Well, Daniel, this is almost like a lifelong question for me.
Yeah.
I believe I was in my early 20s, a medical student in Brazil, and I had a female colleague that was one of my best friends. We studied together in groups. We carpooled, to go to school, and I made a commitment. I'm going to share the message of Jesus with her. And in one of the conversations, I said, Jesus is this, and I explained to her how Jesus had died to save her, to forgive her, and all of that. And it was funny. I was completely stomped when she turned around and says, "I don't need to be saved."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, yes, you do." And we all, "Oh no, I'm good. My life is good. I'm a good person." You know what a lot of people do. She absolutely saw no need for salvation, and I have to confess, I didn't know what to do.
Sure.
So that conversation ended right there without any progress in terms of me sharing the most important thing in my life with one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And so, and you said I was in Japan. There is one of the perceptions about the reason why Japan is one of the most difficult countries for the gospel. Mm-hmm. Japan remains at less than 1% of evangelical Christians, committed Christians, to this day. Yeah. And there is no movement towards conversion, towards Christianity in Japan. There is a lot of resistance. And one of the things that I've read and observed is that Japanese do not perceive a need.
Yeah.
Because they love their culture, they love their way. It's like my friend.
Yeah.
What do I need Jesus for?
Well, gosh, that creates a real tension because, I'm thinking of that context and, I can just imagine sitting there and thinking to myself, man, I want to be faithful. I also don't want to be offensive. Like, I don't, and gosh, if I'm like, no, actually, you really need salvation because, you stand without Christ as an enemy of God like that, man, that sounds harsh. It makes me sound so, offensive.
Judgmental.
Yeah. Judgmental even. And gosh, what an incredible tension and what an incredible difficulty. You've walked a little bit of your life and faith since that moment. I'd be curious what some of your thoughts are to a believer in that context. And I'll just say mine quickly. My first thought is, I think the best thing to do is to understand that absolutely comes from a position of sincere belief. Like they actually think, no, I'm good. And it's simply because Well, until you have some understanding of the standard to which we're expected, right? God's standard of holiness and perfection is well, just that. It's holy. It is set apart. Um, and until there's some right, loving understanding of that, gosh, we can't possibly see that we have that need. And I think it really has to begin with a listening ear, just saying, well, let me listen. Tell me the story of your life. Who are you? What does it look like? I mean, I don't know. What is your initial thought?
Well, what I've read and I've heard from people that reach out to people of other faiths
Hmm.
who might be satisfied with their faith, with their religion, with their allegiance to their God
Hmm.
or gods,
Yeah.
and don't feel the need for a transformation. A lot of times, they say the best thing is you start with Jesus,
Hmm.
and you emphasize and focus on that relationship with Jesus, and they will be receptive,
Hmm.
and so through framing it in terms of a relationship with Jesus, in terms they will it you will be able to get to a point of confronting, because to be a relationship with a perfect Jesus
Yeah.
is can't help but confront your own
Oh, yeah.
flaws and sinfulness. I think of it almost as, remember Isaiah, the vision of Isaiah,
Okay.
where he says, I was in the year that the king Uzziah died, I saw the Lord,
Yeah.
and he sees God, and it's so magnificent, and he says, uh-oh, you know,
That's right.
woe to me.
Woe is me.
I'm undone.
Hmm.
I saw the Lord. I'm not going to survive this.
That's right.
And the angel comes and burns him
Right. Right.
with
Purifies.
and he purifies his lips. What I'm thinking is, with Jesus, it's the same process, maybe a little softer, because you're approaching a man
Yeah.
who is God, who is
Right.
perfect, and as you're confronted with his teachings and with his person and with who he really truly is,
Yeah.
I believe that will lead. You cannot develop a relationship with the real Jesus, not
Right.
some bumper sticker Jesus, but the real Jesus. At some point,
There has to be that realization.
it'll be that realization that, yes, I need him because I am utterly unable, even as quote unquote good a person as I am.
I I think you're right, Norval. I think there's some elements of that, and I can't help but think, it is important as a believer who's trying to be faithful to share Christ with others, that we remember our responsibility isn't to produce the conviction, or to be inherently the representative of the condemnation. Rather, it's to share and celebrate the love, forgiveness, and grace that we have been given, in such a way that they rightly see God as loving, good, gracious, and as having right, holy, perfect expectation. Um, and that those expectations do not come without a means of achieving them, namely Christ, right? A means that He Himself gave of Himself to provide. One of our dear friends and leaders in India, he told it to me this way. He said, Daniel, when we talk about Christ to people, it's less about being a salesman and more about being a satisfied customer, right? It's not about pitching Jesus to somebody as if we're trying to woo them or win them. Rather, it's simply proclaiming, Christ, you have been radically transformational in my life. And when they ask, well, what is that transformation? Well, I'm not gonna tell you that. I'm not necessarily going to point out to all the sins, flaws, failures that you have, but I can gladly point to all of my sins, flaws, and failures because I am full of them. And yet, Christ has forgiven, redeemed, and washed over me in those ways. And I think that's you know I don't know. That's just an important part of that process to kind of avoid I don't want to say avoid, but to help. miss that obstacle, that pitfall of becoming, well, just outright, openly, maybe even consternation, uh, just downright obstinate, difficult, and offensive, right? Again, I'm thinking of the faithful leader here who's going, look, I want to help them see this, but they just haven't quite got there yet. And I think one of the greatest ways is just to proclaim the goodness of Christ that you've endured and experienced. And that goodness isn't just the blessings we've received, but it's also the forgiveness from our own failures. And I think it's in the mix of that God would help us to see those things.
Yeah, it's interesting that I hear you talking, and I'm thinking it's not about convincing people that Jesus is this or that, or the gospel is this or that. Every time we talk about Jesus and we're talking about sharing the gospel and the person of Jesus with those who are still lost, the idea it's Jesus in relationship to me.
Yes.
It's Jesus in relationship to you.
Yes.
It's Jesus and in relationship to humanity.
Mm.
It's in that sense, it doesn't become a proposition,
There you go.
right?
Right. It becomes a story. It becomes I mean, to use the term, a testimony.
Yep.
Right? Like this is what I'm here to testify about, and it's the story of what this relationship looks like in my life. And yeah, there are elements to the following of Jesus that require the storytelling of who Jesus is, who he was, who he promises he'll return to be. But as we're introducing people to Jesus, I think that's right. I think it's constantly keeping it in that framework of who he is in my own life. And I think one of the struggles that we face, and maybe you'd agree, I don't know. I think one of the struggles we face is so often, I think the way in which, particularly in the West, we learn to share Jesus is we watch what's happening in the pulpit. Like that becomes our model, and it's very instructional. It's very, stand up, preach, teach kind of a context. But gosh, when you're sitting
ask
in your
for a show of hands.
That's right. That's right. We ask for a show of hands, and then we give them a practiced prayer. But gosh, when you're sitting in the car talking to your friend, it's not you standing behind a pulpit preaching.
Right.
You're having a conversation with a friend, and yet that's so often our experience on how to share the faith.
It might have been what I did.
Hmm.
I kind of preached a sermon to my friend in the car going to school.
Yeah.
And instead of letting my life speak and speaking about,
Mm-hmm.
how I was an apprentice under Jesus.
That's right.
That's something that I've heard recently that I've used a lot about being a disciple of Jesus, being an apprentice to Jesus.
Let me share this quick quote from Barna. It says, "While it's understandable that a very common offering of churches, that is, a regular message from the pulpit, is seen as the primary medium for communicating about evangelism, Barna has also observed that pastors may overestimate either the centrality or the impact of their own sermons." I think for Christian leaders listening today, gosh, that's a sobering reality. If I believe that I am discipling evangelism effectively, purely and exclusively through my preaching and teaching from behind the pulpit, I might be missing something there. I mean, does that reflect true in your own observations, just in faith?
We just said it's relational, and so proclamation is important.
Yeah,
but the process of somebody coming from non-faith to faith is relational.
yeah. Well, again, our dear friend Dan Slagle said it this way. He said, Daniel, we were talking through evangelism, and he said, I know a lot of different evangelistic programs or processes. He said, but I've never led somebody to the Lord through one of those. It's always been through those relationships. I even think of a wonderful gentleman and his wife. We've known them for a very long time. I love them dearly. They do not know the Lord. And again, that apprenticeship to Jesus kind of language is something that has recently become very intriguing to him. He understands. He has long observed my life and my wife's life. He's seen our family. and he's seen the blessings of God in our family. Uh, and when I was talking, I mean, I've invited him to church a dozen times. We talk about Jesus, fairly frequently, but there was something new that caught his ear. And I said, yeah, in our church, we're just trying to understand who Jesus was, what he taught, and how to live like that, how to apprentice to him in that kind of a way. And that was a very, again, kind of revolutionary idea. He goes, well, hold on. I've heard some good things about this Jesus guy. He seems to be pretty good. I've watched you guys for a long time. Maybe there's something to that. And so I share that as a story, just to say, I think you're right. I think there's some maybe some new in our culture in the post Christian West. Maybe there's some new openness to rediscovering some of those things and saying, more than anything else, I want an abiding relationship with this God man whose name is Jesus. And here's what he said. Here's what he's taught. Here's what he looked like.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that we've talked before we started recording,
Hmm.
which is that idea of understanding the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, we live in a post-Christian, and I've heard somebody say post-Christian,
Yeah.
or where people don't even have a framework anymore. But they know about this Jesus person because, at least in America, it is still something that somebody that is mentioned.
Sure.
He's quoted everywhere, and people don't even know that they're
yeah.
doing it. But and so I believe understanding where the culture is and helps us to understand where people are. It's the other side of it. It's a little more technical, if you will, than just talking about the relationship and how I apprentice to Jesus. But how I apprentice to Jesus, how I follow Jesus in my story and the story of Jesus embedded in my story.
Yeah.
I can be culturally insensitive and speak and share it in a language that really won't be understood. It'll seem so foreign that people won't know what to do with it.
Well, you shared a little about this story of the Peace Child, right? And how as missionaries in this context where there wasn't really there wasn't a cultural understanding that could really be connected back to, or at least there seemed to be not a cultural context that could kind of connect back to this gospel message, et cetera. Do you mind just kind of unpacking that a little bit? Because I think it was a great example of how listening to understand where that individual is coming from, the culture that they're coming from, the context that they're coming from, learning, walking with them and along with them, and then helping them, okay, so now that I understand where you are, now I see what that natural connection is to this story of Jesus, because I do think it's a part of the human story. To unpack that a little.
Well, I'll try to make it as succinctly as possible because it is a long story. But Don Richardson was a missionary in Papua New Guinea many, many years ago. This is all in a book, in his book, bestseller book, which was even made into a movie called Peace Child. He went to share the message of Jesus with this people that lived in a Stone Age tribal situation.
Okay.
Violent, constant bickering and wars between villages and tribes, cannibalism.
Wow.
And so he goes and preaches the message, and when he is telling a story of Jesus, he discovers that the highest value of this culture was deceit and treachery. And it's a long story, but their culture valued deceiving somebody for a long time.
Yeah.
Until you gained their confidence.
Yeah.
And then you would kill them and eat them.
Wow.
They were cannibals.
Yeah.
To get their energy and all that. It's a horrible
Well, that would
story.
seem like an impossible context to try and share
Well,
gospel.
Much worse, because all of a sudden Judas becomes the hero of the Sawi people, this tribal people.
Don is telling them the story of Jesus, and because there's this cultural element that values treachery, right, and deceit, they begin to see Judas as the hero of this story.
Right. It's the gospel becomes about Judas. It's the Sawi hero. He
Wow.
betrayed Jesus
Hmm.
so well. I mean, he walked with him 3 years and
Wow.
then betrayed him. Well, another circumstance within that violence, situation was becoming untenable
Mhm.
because they were fighting each other, they were killing each other, and finally, under pressure to make peace,
Yeah.
they assembled the different villages together, and they did something that at first scared the daylight out of the missionaries,
Yeah.
because one leader from one village went to the other village and picked up a child, a baby,
Hmm.
snatched it from their mother's hands, and then another one came and snatched a baby from this village, and they've exchanged a baby.
Wow.
And at first he thought they were going to murder the child, but no, they said, no, this is the peace child.
Hmm.
So long as this child from the other village lives in my village, we're at peace.
Hmm.
And we can't make war. They can't attack us. They can't do anything. And the worst thing that could happen is if they kill the peace child, that's what happens. In 20 years, this child will be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a war, and if a warrior from the other village kills this peace child, it'll be horrible. It'll be the ultimate act of treason, and it will. So they don't make war so that inadvertently they wouldn't kill the peace child. Well, Don says, okay, now let me tell you about God sending his peace child to the world to live among us.
Wow.
And it was interesting because then the Sawi said, wait, Judas killed the peace child? Yeah, he did. So all of a sudden, Judas was no longer the hero, but Jesus was the hero because he was the peace child.
Wow.
And that was the bridge to the gospel for that particular people. And the reason I brought up this story is because Don Richardson continues studying further into the future and studies cultures all over the world and realizes that there is we can't say in every culture because there are thousands, but in multiple cultures of the world, there are identified items of their mythology, their lore, or their customs, or even their religion that are some small, some big bridges to the message of Jesus that will help them understand what God did and what Jesus did, and then once they understand what Jesus did, they will be open to receiving the message of the gospel and becoming followers of Jesus. And I was wondering about our own culture. Sometimes we think these things apply to tribal cultures in Papua New Guinea and in the ends of the world, but redemptive analogies in our own backyard.
Yeah.
I wonder.
I mean, Norval, I think there's just so many powerful things there that, to your last point, I think you're right, man. If we're to be in the world but not of the world, we must all be cross-cultural missionaries. In our cultural context, it's changed in the post-Christian or post-Christian world, in the extent that, there's going to have to be that acknowledgement. Wait a second, God, you're working out these redemptive stories in the culture in which I live, in the context in which I live. And, we serve leaders in all contexts of the world. And so it's a matter of looking for those redemptive story arcs, asking God, how did you uniquely set this up? Because I gotta imagine Don and his family were sitting there at some point going, God, there's just no way, right? How on earth am I supposed to share the gospel faithfully, share this good news faithfully in a context where treachery is celebrated? And you got to imagine there's some part of him that felt like a total failure the moment everybody's sitting there going, well, Judas is the hero. He's like, wait, no, I failed to communicate the gospel even that way. There has to be some degree where he was feeling those things, and yet patience, faithfulness, steadfastness in listening and hearing and looking. God, where are you opening the door for this conversation to take place. And again, that's the difference between waiting for the open door or trying to bust down the door. If somebody comes to my house and just busts down the door, it doesn't matter if I know them or not. If you're busting down my door, I'm probably going to be a little anxious and apprehensive as to who are you and why are you bringing down my door? But if my door is positioned, right, cracked and open because I know somebody's coming or I'm welcoming someone in, well, then it doesn't surprise me at all. Or if I just know I have a guest who's coming and the door's closed, it doesn't concern me at all that they just walk in. In the same way, I think if we try to show up with this story of Jesus, this gospel story, this hope-filled, transformational story, and we just bust down somebody's door, we're putting them on their heels. They're going to be defensive. Whereas if we wait for that open opportunity, gosh, it's going to be received with sweetness, kindness, and then we can faithfully be sharing the gospel without worrying about the offense that it's going to cause. Yeah, man, what a beautiful story from Don. And that's a
Yeah,
testimony.
it is a tremendous testament, and we do, Daniel, we do have the best story. We have the answer that we found for our lostness
That's right.
and our sinfulness and our brokenness, and he transformed our lives, and he is shaping us and reshaping us to look like Jesus.
Yeah.
And we want to share that with others, but we do need to be careful.
Yeah.
We do need to be sensitive, and we do need to be culturally appropriate and sensitive wherever we are.
Absolutely. And it's got to have at its root a motivation of love and a motivation that says, I want to love and celebrate. And yeah, I'm going to tell you some of the hard things, but that's because I love you. It's because I'm celebrating the good news that comes from that. Norval, I love this conversation, and I'm really thankful that we're able to have it. I'd love to have another conversation with you about the gospel and talking about its vertical, its horizontal, the various elements of it. We were in Malta together, and a believer there said the phrase, when we say that Jesus came as the Prince of Peace, that means a very different thing in the Middle East. And so I'd love to have a little conversation about that with you. Would you be open to that?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, let's do that. Hey, listen, if this has served you well, we want to, again, say thank you so much. If there are ways that you're looking as a leader in the body of Christ to grow, to be used by God faithfully, listen, the International Leadership Institute is here. We serve Christian leaders so that they can discover and fulfill their God-given mission and vision. We believe that the gospel accelerates when leaders are equipped. So let us serve you, equipping you with the 8 core values of the most faithful Christian leaders. You can discover more, connect with us, and follow up with us at iliteam.org. I hope to see you there.